partway through the contract topics that I would take away the remedies lecture, and you wouldn't have to do that, so you still have the notes. And the reason that I had done that, sort of to repeat a bit, is that it seemed with this group that an extra bit of time with the review would be useful. So that's why I gave Monday and then today to talk about things. So I thought Monday would be sort of a bit more anxious than today, and part of the review process was taking that into account, that generally speaking people get anxious around exams, and I want to kind of work through that. So in terms of the format, I talked a bit about this before, that there'd be 3 questions, 1 contract, 1 tort, and then 1 overlap. And the way that I weighted the questions was 35 for each of the first 2, which gives 70, and then 30 for the overlap. And the reason I did that was because I thought the extra bit of weighting to the individual contract and tort would be to your benefit. And then also with the last question, some people don't finish. So although I write the exam thinking that you will finish, like I think it's doable within 3 hours, so 1 hour per question. Sometimes people ask, and forgive me if I'm thinking more about England, but people will ask, are there a certain number of cases you have to cite, or certain number of pages? There's no minimum. So the expectations for this course generally are that it's at a graduate level, although in my opinion at least, that's sort of a soft expectation. What I mean by that is the grading tends to be, in my grading at least, will be different for here than, say, other programs elsewhere. And that's different in terms of the easier grading, if that makes sense.
Let me understand. That means your grading is easier
than elsewhere.
Okay. Just to
sorry? So, that doesn't mean that there are no expectations. Certainly, and I think this came out sometimes in Monday, just naming something is insufficient. So, just with one of the questions we dealt with was economic duress. So just mentioning economic duress or saying, here's the test and this applies, wouldn't be, let's call it a complete answer. So when you've all done exams here, I think already, when you get your exam results back, everybody has a different mark, but sometimes it seems as though everybody's written the same thing, assuming everybody's truthful about what they wrote. The difference in the grading comes with the completeness of the response. And that's what I've tried to show you throughout the past, I don't know how many weeks it was, but throughout the summer, that it's not simply about, here's the case, it applies. You have to draw that out. What are the criteria? So we spent a while on exclusion clauses, for example, the Turcon test. So applying those criteria that Mr. Justice Binney set out in Turcon and elaborating on it. And also what I've tried to show is there are different ways of approaching the same set of facts, meaning you can find different arguments depending on how you see the law, you can find different arguments for each side. And so all of that is available for you to show on an exam. And so I don't come in, I don't have, for example, I write answers for myself for the questions, but they're mainly just cases and how they can apply, but that's not a sort of a tick box exercise. And why I'm mentioning that is to say that generally speaking, people will get these key points, but I try to be expansive enough to allow for different types of arguments to be rewarded. Now it has to be accurate. If it's inaccurate in some way, then I think we can all agree that that wouldn't score as high as somebody that is accurate. So when we're talking about a complete answer, that's what I'm talking about, and that's the differentiation that you see when people get different grades. Some people are just more elaborate than others in terms of outlining what their response is. I said this before, but I'll repeat it again. You don't have to cite the full case name. You don't need the full citation. There's no expectation for that. Using the right case name is expected. And applying the test, or if it's relevant, is expected. I'm just running through, I'm just thinking through the instructions from the exam, if there's anything else to mention. You know it's open book, so I think you can bring anything in except a friend. So,
what about Ronan?
You can bring whatever you want. But is that correct? Like you can bring in your books and when it's open book? Okay. Because I know the bar exams, they make you leave everything there.
Yeah.
Which I've never understood. So you can take anything that you bring in.
Excuse me, can
yeah.
you clarify outlining different arguments? Do we need to also write the, let's say if we are defendants, do we need to write the plaintiff's argument also? Or
Well, so
from both?
keep in mind what I've said throughout, and that is that you're not really looking at plaintiffs and defendants. You're looking at that moment that somebody first comes to you with a set of facts. And they say, do I have a case, or does somebody have a case against me? So you're looking at what are the arguments that would be, that would stem from those facts as the law is applied. So that's both sides. So X will say there was an offer, B will say, well, it wasn't accepted. Just to give a very simple example. That's what I mean by it. And as I said before, and forgive me for repeating, law exams tend to be at this moment when a client first comes to you. It's not when you're in the court. Because when you're in the court, you're advocating for one side, and you usually have all the facts that you need at that time. But law exams, sometimes you may feel there are facts missing. And I dealt with that by saying, if you think something is missing, then you say, well, if X happened, then I would advise this. If Y happened, I'd advise this. And that's all part of the analysis that's involved. Knowing not only how the law applies, but what questions need to be asked in order to completely address, in a legal sense, the facts. So that's what I'm talking about with the different arguments. And again, it's something that has been consistently applied throughout the entire time that we've been doing the course. So I've tried in each class to model basically what it is that you'd be doing for an exam. And then in the review, what I've been trying to do is get your opinions on what arguments are available and sort of mentally, orally work through what mentally you would do in an exam, and that is kind of canvas different arguments, Balcar.
Just in terms of like expectations, right? So you know how when we dealt with Monday's question, the primary issue at hand was consideration, right? Is it?
But if you feel that there were others, then you can say that. But as I was saying, that's why I started with economic duress. If you think there was economic duress in that set of facts, then you have to show how the criteria are met.
Well, I was going to say too, just in terms of once you're pretty much dealt with the primary issue at hand, is it just fair just to go towards the other arguments and explain why they couldn't amount?
If you want, sure. I don't expect that because I think you can kind of go on indefinitely with that, and given time constraints, I think it's better to look at it this way, that, and we've talked about this, sort of a hierarchy of responses. To me, the question we did on Monday, consideration would be the strongest argument, keeping in mind that there are some issues there even where we left off, I think, with Constantina's analysis was, is there a practical benefit type argument at the end in that third event, potentially. But if you have other arguments, you go through those, but just apply the cases. Like it's not enough, unless you're running out of time and you do bullet points to say, well, I would have done this and here's the case, then I'll give marks as I can. But in terms of a complete response, it has to be
the primary issue.
Yeah, and then any other issues that you might see. So keep in mind, something that comes to mind with the language Balcar used, the primary issue. I haven't used that phrasing because if we think of a negligence claim in tort, we can't really say, if there are two issues, the duty and, let's say, causation. Duty is the primary and causation is the secondary. There are two issues, right? So I don't want you to think that there's really one big one and then maybe a few small ones. Just the way the facts unroll, what issues do you see? And maybe within that you see some as being more important than others, but I'm cautioning you against seeing it as primary, secondary if we look at negligence, because those are both primary issues because of the four stages.
What's viable, right?
Yeah.
Do you prefer the Iraq method or not?
I prefer the clear method. I think at this stage, in my impression is even in this program, you're told different things by different instructors. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I, again, kind of think there are more important things in life than the format. So I don't want you to be bogged down with a format, like if I say, do IRAC, and that isn't something that you're as familiar with or comfortable with. My fear is that potentially diminishes your performance. That's why I say, like, however you think is best to clearly state your response. I don't have anything beyond that, and that applies to the essay as well. We talked a bit about it, like you have an introduction, the body, and then a conclusion. But how you carry on with that, I don't think there is one format. Especially in law, I don't think there's necessarily one format for everything. I think there are different ways of approaching things. And I don't want to stifle the way that you do things. Other questions?
One more
Yeah.
question. So in terms of like, for example, if X case applies for the fact pattern, or like Y case different, it's different somehow like from the fact pattern. So do we have to mention to these specific points, like the analogous part or the differentiated part, or are
So-
you expecting these things?
So if I could just clarify what I think you're asking, if the facts in a question are similar, let's say largely to one case.
Yes.
So we did this with BG Checo on Monday. So if the facts are similar to BG Checo, but there are a couple of differences, I think you're asking, do we look at BG Checo? Yeah.
And do we have to like reflect our thinking that these are the different parts or facts than the fact
Yeah.
pattern that we've been given, or
Because, yeah, because, so we start from the principle that you learned in foundations, or at least I hope you did, that like cases should be decided alike. And I said before that it's amazing how often there's a distinction amongst cases. So you have facts that, let's say, are 50% like BG Checo, but then you have a couple of variations. And there are cases that are similar to that. So you're sort of combining these three cases, let's say, in your analysis.
Yeah.
That would be fine. The purpose being that you're showing, well, this is how the Supreme Court did this in BG Checo, and here are these other two cases that also deal with this. So putting it all together, my assessment would be this. So I think as a corollary to your question, knowing the facts of cases can be useful.
Yes.
And I think that has been illustrated through the time we've spent. Other questions? Do most of you type? I know you do.
I will write.
Yeah. I'm just curious more than anything. I thought most people would type, but I know some people don't feel as comfortable with typing.
How many of us is handwriting?
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 Quite a few.
Oh, that's a wow.
Handwriting is
You
more.
got your answer.
The only one upset about it is Ariona. She has to scan them all.
Oh,
Oh,
So
How they gonna send it to you?
scan.
Scan it? Because other courses, different people who marked the assignment and the exam.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
Yeah.
This is personal and it's not a comment on anyone else. To me, it seems more fair for me to
Yes.
mark everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
my approach.
Sure.
But if there are reasons that other people do something different, there must be valid reasons. I can only control what we do here.
I wonder if
Sorry.
the grades are gonna come out at the same time for the papers and the exam, or are they gonna come out?
I'm going to try, except for those that have made other arrangements, to get you the paper marks back before your paper is due. I hope, see, the thing about getting it to you right before the exam is, if you don't like your mark, I don't want that affecting
Yes.
things. So just, somebody asked me the other day, can we send you sample answers? And I said, yes, but not, let's cut it off a week before the exam. The reason why I say that is, I've had it happen where I'm very hesitant to send back comments to someone that hasn't understood something. I just think that's sort of soul crushing to get that so close to the exam. And I don't want, I think part of preparation is sort of building up confidence. So that's why I say let's cut that off at about a week before, so that we just don't get into that kind of a scenario and you're wondering, well, why didn't he respond, or something like that. So I'll do what I can with the papers, certainly. But some people I understand have made other arrangements as well. So that wouldn't,
Do we know already for sure the day of the exam?
I thought it was October 4, but I get different information from some of you that it's not been official.
No, I got an email.
It is
Sorry?
official?
They confirmed it by email.
Okay.
They
Okay.
confirmed it?
You haven't received
Yeah,
it?
nine. Yeah.
By what, email?
They haven't said.
Only you received it.
I haven't received it.
I have.
No, he will say personal email.
I didn't receive the
You
Oh,
emailed
personal.
the
Yeah,
office.
I emailed the office and they say October 4th. Mine.
So he's not saying there is a general email sent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And why they don't put it on the website?
Yeah.
Thank you.
What kind of day is that?
Friday. Friday.
I should get them by December.
It's okay,
December?
even if
No.
the results are out in January, it's fine.
Sorry?
Even if the results, the grades will be out.
No,
in
I
January,
wouldn't
it's
be-
fine.
No, because we,
I
for us
wouldn't
it's the last course. so
do
we want
that.
to-
Like January, there'd be no reason to extend it that long. What I'd suggest is if you don't want to look at it until January,
That's why I'm saying even if.
don't look at it then.
It's okay.
But I can't hide it until January.
The overall markup, like.
Sorry?
The overall markup, like the total course, like latest, when we can receive it, at least.
I'm not sure, it would be this term. I'm not 100% sure when.
Like, for example, October 28th is our last paper's like deadline.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be November. Like it'd be early December at earliest, if that's what you're looking at, because I need to mark.
Because my only concern before Christmas would have for those who are already applied for the bar exam and all those stuff, so it should be ready before the Christmas, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, well that
Okay.
goes to
That's
the
why.
question.
That is my only concern.
Yeah, that wouldn't be, the reason why I say around early December is just to give time. I don't know how things run internally here, so
Yeah.
when I submit the marks, it's not necessarily when you get them.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to create a problem here,
Yeah.
but you're free to email and ask in, say, second week of December. Other questions? Yeah.
I have a request.
Okay.
Do you have any model answer for the type of question?
No, so that was something that I sort of, I guess I hadn't made clear. I don't give out a sample answer because it gives the impression that this is the answer. So what I'm doing with you here is doing exactly how I would grade it. Going through what are the available arguments and sort of testing them. So what we did on Monday, we came up with some arguments. Some were better than others. Some didn't work, some did. That's what I mean by sort of having a more expansive view to what you can respond with. And I keep in mind that here you need at least a 70,
Sorry?
if that's a worry.
Yes.
So you can't have a mark below 70.
Yes.
And like you can get 2 courses below 70, but my understanding is this course, if you get below 70, it causes a problem.
Yes.
So I keep,
Yes.
for your own, in case you're worried about it, I keep in mind the 70.
Great.
Yeah.
So we can count our 71.
Was that a worry?
Yes. You are not aware how much,
Do people not keep it in mind, or?
You never know, sometimes you write that you think everything, you know, heaven on earth,
Okay,
and the results will be out and, you know, you'll be disappointed, so
okay.
in order to be on the safe side, just.
No, I keep in mind
Yeah.
70,
We have to
like,
study.
I have had
Study, yeah.
situations where people
Yeah.
say get below 70 on the exam, but their papers keep them above 70. So I wouldn't take it as minimum you can get is 70. The minimum, I keep in mind that as a final mark, it's more useful to you if it's above 70.
Yes.
So, and also I try to watch for things like a 9, like a 79. You know, I'll amend the mark
Half a mark.
if you have a 9 of some kind.
Yeah.
Just I got a couple. I remember my first degree, I got a couple of 79s, and they're kind of infuriating.
It's enough if you
It
give
was
half.
the lowest mark too.
7, 9, and
And
half
it was like,
is already.
and you know, when you try to tell people, they don't believe you. So I keep that in mind.
I got, in one class, I got 69.5.
Anything round it?
They round,
But it's
they
still
round.
my,
They
the
round.
final score is higher, but I mean, one is 69.5.
But,
Which I did not study.
No, so like
They
the,
rounded. 69.5 is 70.
No, when I did legal research, she did not round it up. No. I got 79.5 or 75. Yeah, 79.75. Yeah, that's it.
yeah. So all I'm saying is like.
Yeah, if only it matters, you know, I don't know.
I said
For me, they rounded
but
once.
she didn't round it
Remember I
up.
was on the item, I got the better.
So what I've tried to convey is, I try to be as helpful as possible while maintaining some level of integrity to the program. But in terms of, like, if you look at past exams, they give you an idea of what we're doing. That's why I'm doing a past exam with you. Exam questions won't be things new. It'll be stuff that we've done. I think that makes sense. Did you have a question? I'm trying to think if there's anything else before we move into the tort question. If you are handwriting, just make it as clear as you can.
Let's hope the scanner is good.
The what?
Let's hope the scanner is good quality.
Yeah.
Anyway, they just don't send it by courier.
They can't. This is something international.
Yeah, they can be lost. It can be lost.
Yeah, so they would have to photocopy each of them. That's why, like,
I mean, they
any
can
university in the
photocopy
world, they
and
tell
then
instructors,
send it,
don't
huh?
take them with you on the plane. At one university, one guy lost 6 exams. And then they paid them. This was in the UK, they paid them £300 each.
So they write again.
And they had to write again, and then he found them.
Then
Then he found them.
After writing again, or just after getting
I'm not
the-
sure. It wasn't me. I don't know the details. But that's why they don't ship the entire lot.
I don't know, Professor Mongan, you travel a lot, so that story that wasn't me.
Sorry?
I said you travel a lot, so your story that it wasn't you. Was in 60s. It's kind of That doesn't go well to.
That's an easy solution, you just give
And
A
the
plus,
plan,
you know, and nobody
Yeah,
will
no,
question.
The state for the laws.
I actually get concerned about that. Like so I'll do them, like I keep them very in a safe place and so on, if I get exams and I'm in the country.
Do we have a tort case in that case?
You tell me. That could be part of your makeup exam.
No, duty and position.
Yeah. Maybe psychiatric distress
For sure, for sure.
after Sadati. anything
Personality
can happen.
change.
I used to be a lawyer, now I'm not.
Life changed completely.
Yeah, I used to love donuts, but no longer. That's a lot, my friend.
So I can't think of anything else. And I assume you don't have any questions immediately, so as we go along, you can let me know. So I'll give you, I have 650. So if we look at question 2 on last year's exam, it's the one where it says Diana signed up to the online dating app 4 years old.
2018?
Yeah. So is 20 minutes good for you to kind of look through that, come up with some ideas about responses, and you can finish off any donuts that are left.